Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about the Season 4 Dragonflight PTR. Basically, Blizzard, whenever they did a This Week in WoW newsletter, they talked about on March 26th, which is the day this is being recorded, that there was going to be Season 4 available for testing on the PTR. And so now we're going to be covering all of that it encompasses and what we've kind of seen on the PTR. So first and foremost, there's actually not a ton on the Dragonflight PTR as it currently stands. You can see this post by Archie. He kind of talks about it, where it's like 10.2.6 went live last week, although Season 4 is a part of the patch, is yet to be tested on the PTR until this week. There's also some weird stuff with item level scaling. It only appears to be a partially rolled out, as M0 was just hotfixed over the last couple of minutes from the previous 440 item level that we had last season to the expected 489. There's also still a couple of bugs with the item level scaling inside of M+ dungeons. This is pretty typical for a PTR of like Season 4 stuff. So that's kind of expected to be fixed over the next, coming days, maybe even hours after recording this video. Even there's an update here where some previous season items are now appearing on the PvP vendor. They're only 250 item level, but can be scaled up to M+ with the test aura. And the dungeon journal has now also been updated for Season 4. So initially, whenever the PTR launched, there actually wasn't anything on it. There was like no vendors, there was no real dungeons or anything really available for testing, and that kind of had people asking like, oh, so what is actually going to be on the Season 4 PTR? The answer is still not exactly a ton. Now, there is Season 4 Mythic Plus dungeon testing, which is probably the most important thing that's actually on the PTR, and they're doing limited time testing again, and this limited time is going from March 26th to April 1st, and of course they're going to be rotating it. Typically it ends up being from like Thursday to Mondays. That's normally what they've been doing with PTR testing as of late for Mythic Plus. It hasn't been just kind of whenever. I'm not in love with this personally. I know this is more like of a news thing, but like I'm not in love with like the temporary testing. Now, it says on this post as well, the following dungeons are available for testing on Heroic, Mythic, and Mythic Plus difficulties with the new dungeon progression update. And that is Azure Vault, Brackenite Hollow, RLP, Halls of Infusion, Alg Academy, Noku Defensive, Neltharis, and Uldaman. And also during the test period, you'll be able to acquire and customize Mythic Plus keystones by talking to the keystone vendor in Stormwind or Orgrimmar, and the nearby dungeon teleport NPCs will assist you in transportation. We look forward to hearing your feedback. On top of that, there's also going to be stuff with testing out new tier sets. That's actually kind of a big thing, where what does your Season 4 tier set look like? How is that going to really feel with your class? That's something that they probably want some feedback and some data on, although it was voted on, and they are bringing back old tier sets into the fray. There's also been a couple of other things where the Awakened raid rotation, which is formerly known as Fated, the Awakened raid rotation has been confirmed in Season 4. We previously didn't know if they were necessarily going to be rotating raids or what their desired plan or structure was going to be for this Awakened season. And as it currently stands, it looks like with the rotation confirmed, the new Awakened raid rewards will likely require 3 weeks to complete. And you do get, the Voyaging Waterling. I actually like this mount. This mount looks sick. Probably will go and do at least these dungeons on Heroic to be able to get this myself. But yeah, there was also, basically they were just saying that the dungeons or the raids are going to be rotating. So it's not like a huge situation. On top of that, there is a Dinar-like system that we're going to be seeing in Season 4. And that is now called the Antique Bronze Bullion. And that's on the vendor on the Season 4 PTR. Include the new cosmetic vendor as well. And so with the Dinar vendor, those are up on the Dragonflight 10.2.6 Season 4 PTR, selling weapons, trinkets, and cantrip items from all 3 raids, alongside 4 vendors selling cosmetic items. So this is kind of what we saw in the last season of Shadowlands, where you were only able to buy, and if you look on this Wowhead post, you were only able to buy like the most important items with the Dinars, or the, I guess, what are they called again? Something Boolean. Antique bronze bullions. So you were only able to buy specific things with the antique bronze bullions, and those were the most important items, whether it be weapons and trinkets and some weapons with the cantrip effects and stuff like that, where that is actually, the most important stuff that you should be looking to buy. And they wanted it to be deterministic on, like, they didn't want you to need to buy like, a random helmet that just had good stats on it. You can get that from somewhere else, or you can catalyze it. But yeah, and then on top of that, there being cosmetics on the vendor. That's also kind of interesting. I don't think that we saw that at the end of Shadowlands, where there was any like cosmetics or anything like that. Jigglesworth Senior is on the vendor. in case you need that from last Fated season. Now Jigglesworth Senior can be purchased for 3 of the antique booleans. There's also the Scale of Awakening legendary upgrade item, which if you are a Fearlath user or if you're using the Zero, that's actually a pretty interesting way of acquiring that. I didn't know how the Scale of Awakening acquisition process was going to work, if it was going to be very difficult to get, but the fact that you only used Dinars to be able to get it, or the Antique Booleans to be able to get it, it's actually fairly promising, all things considered. Now, the last thing that we have on the menu for you guys today is a massive amount of tuning that we're going to be seeing. And I actually had an opportunity to catch up with one of the Wowhead class writers, Word Up, and kind of talk about some of the dungeon tuning. And we can cut to that right now of him and I talking through some of the most important things that we've seen with this dungeon tuning. All right. I've been joined by Word Up. Word Up, the world-renowned enhancement shaman. Well, actually, kind of world-renowned. Definitely Britain-renowned enhancement shaman. And we're going to be covering some of the most important dungeon changes that we saw today. What was your snap reaction to these, Word Up?
Like straight off rip, my first take is like these are aimed at weekly key players. Like
Okay.
almost all of these things are the kind of things that like your guy who goes into a key each week just to get his vault gets really annoyed at. Like most of these are just fairly inconsequential things that you can deal with when you're like playing at the high end, but at the low end they just get more and more annoying, and they're not necessarily on you to do. It's other people in the group, so it just eases the burden of pugs.
So right off the rip, I mean, what we see at the top of this article is they're kind of going through the difficulty squish that they're implementing for Season 4. I mean, that's been covered before. Basically, they're trying to get keys to be more accessible to newer players. And like Word Up is saying, I mean, it seems like there's like a lot of visual clarity changes where it's like, okay, we updated the dungeon checkpoint in Halls of Infusion. Great change. I'm never complaining about them fixing the dungeon checkpoint in these keys. Containment apparatus beam damage has been reduced a little bit, but a lot of it's like, Titanic Fish visual now it's a little bit better. What do you think about this Primal Tsunami change that you see right here?
Like that one is, I think that one is one where it's been there to help your average player, your weekly player, that happens to overlap with something that really annoys people in high-end keys. And it's just like a knock-on of helping both groups. Because the annoying thing in high-end is you have to tune it, phase them in time, or else you have to do an entire extra intermission. Whereas in lower end keys, someone dies, that means that's an extra 2 minutes on that boss, and that's really annoying if you end up with a pug that's not that great. So that one's like the most impactful for everyone. I think most of these are just makes your week easier. There's a lot of volume of interrupts reductions in something like Knockhood has quite a lot of those where they just cut abilities that were organized interrupting.
Yeah, so I mean, we can cut to Noku Defensive as well. There's a couple of abilities that have been removed in a few of these keys as well. I saw a couple in Brackenhide Hollow also. Storm Bolt has been removed. That's a cast that you'd have to interrupt. Storm Shock. These are the mobs at the end of the dungeon that I don't know if anybody's ever pulled, frankly. Like, I haven't ever played these mobs at the end of the key. And so, like you're saying,
these are really, really dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but like, in high-end groups, you're not pulling mobs that are very dangerous, but for, a more average player, they wouldn't know that those are scary mobs. They're like, oh, these are good. They're right there.
And then they just get bodied by one of those casts.
I think it's interesting.
The Valakar one, that's big, I think.
I think this is so weird that they did this in Nokud, and they also did this in Algathar Academy. So frequency of storm winds during the intermission has been reduced to every 10 seconds, was previously 6 seconds. And those are the ground circle lightning zones, aren't they?
Yeah, that's like the thing that you get hit by them, you die. But that meant that you had to constantly be moving in that intermission.
Yeah, and then they did it in Alg Academy as well for Croth. It says Firestorm's frequency has been reduced. Firestorm is like, it's the thing that stuns Croth and makes him take bonus damage. I don't think exactly what they mean is Firestorm. I think they're talking about the circles that happen after the Firestorm, though.
Yeah, I think that's the swirlies that are all over the place once you set off the fire side. And they've reduced the tank damage, because that one was a pretty notorious tank buster.
Yeah.
For specifically warriors really struggled with that. So I think that going down is probably healthy if they're going to up the damage of everything.
This is a banger, by the way. Savage Peck initial and periodic damage being reduced. It felt like in this key, your tank needed to, and this is especially true at like high level, either be a dwarf or you had to play with an evoker to be able to cauterize the tank fairly regularly.
Yeah.
awesome.
That was a really scary tank buster.
Yeah. Beyond that, we had some stuff in Brackenhide Hollow. I feel like all the changes to Brackenhide Hollow are to make the mobs that were deemed like not great or very difficult to pull and made them a little bit easier. You know, Stink Breath got some changes. Probably still don't want to pull him, but you can. They also
I think
changed.
Stink Breath is the biggest one in there personally, because that's one of the ones where you can skip it, but it's really annoying to skip it for a pug.
Exactly.
You aren't going to get coordinated with that. So if you pulled that, that was like a this is a nightmare pull, gonna kill a group kind of thing. Now it's avoidable mostly.
If he disorients your tank, you're still in a decent amount of trouble. But now it seems like it's a lot more playable. And again, I think that your assessment of these are good changes for average players, especially if you're just more casually doing the keys and you're like holding W and you're not really thinking about it too much. These are definitely going to be better changes for the average players. You know, the stalker, if you accidentally pull the stalker, the shot and the debuff is not going to just completely own you. There's obviously a couple of mechanics that have been removed, but then it's not really attacking for like high end players. Whenever you see Brackenhide Hollow, you're like, oh, I wish the totem would be cut in half health wise. But these are more aimed at like, oh, okay, we're making every mob in this dungeon pullable if you do the key any different direction.
I think they've removed things that are annoying, like the summon lashes. That's just a time extension thing of it's just going to funnel loads and loads of mobs and drag things out.
Yep.
And Touch of Decay, I think that's the spreading haste debuff. Oh, I might be wrong.
It's the disease that you use the cauldron to like clear off of you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just like it reduces your damage, which makes everything slower, and it's just annoying. I think they've got a lot of anything that's really annoying. We're just not going to have anymore kind of things.
What do you think of Azure Vault getting a minute on the timer? This one's I feel like that timer was pretty I don't want to say lenient, but it was not bad in season 1.
I think Azure Vault's timer increase might be like them preempting a possible problem because that dungeon had like 3 separate timer increases, I think, over season
Yes.
1, and they might be worried that it's going to still be the timer heavy one, so they're just adding a minute on for the extra health for Fated, just in case.
So anecdotally, I think if you walk in there with a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you're probably able to do all of the very hard pulls that make that dungeon not that challenging timer wise. But if you don't,
well, that's a vengeance problem.
but okay, so that's a vengeance thing. But if you don't have a Vengeance Demon Hunter, yeah, I mean, I'm down for a minute on the timer. Again, precast visual and piercing shard. I'm down for this. This makes it way better. Impact area being reduced. Like these are Mystic Vapors being cast less frequently. These are good changes for players who aren't going to be super coordinated with CC chains, I think is the best way of describing it. And basically no pug is coordinated with a CC chain, let's be honest. It's not happening.
Yeah. High-end groups struggle with proper coordination on some of this. So like I think having the frontal be telegraphed is really good because in a pug, it's really easy for your tank to not be that comfortable and then suddenly whip around and send the frontal flying. If you know it's coming, you can at least do something about it.
Dude, did you know they added a kill plane whenever you jump down from Azure Blade to Taelash Greywing? There's a kill plane there now, so you actually have to go the other
so you
way.
can't do the jump and glide?
You can't do the jump and glide. You actually have to go through the frog alley.
Well, I suppose that might make the timer a little bit more exciting because there was a lot of skipping of that.
I like the Neltharus changes where you're less punished if you don't have a decurse in the dungeon, where the Warlord Saga basically has a difference. They also changed Burning Chains, now stunning all enemies, increasing their damage taken by 50% for 5 seconds, as opposed
I
to
think they had to do that because they had to address those. But this has kept it so they're still relevant, but you have to coordinate and do something with it. Like you have to do your damage into it. It's not free.
I think that each Burning Chain can only be used once, as opposed to, okay, now the tank grabs the chain and stuns them for 5 seconds, and now the healer grabs the chain and stuns them for 5 seconds. That's also like a better solution. There was a lot of bugginess with the chains, and I think that players also receptively hated the concept of using the chains to solo the dungeon for you. Like that seems like that wasn't very well received.
Like I know that they like the individual dungeon mechanics, like the weapons in Necrotic Plague and everything, but the chains were like they were an unfun puzzle to solve of redirecting trash around, letting the dungeon kill it for you. So I think they've made these more of a fun extra.
They got a nerf
dungeon as well.
Oh, what about that dungeon? Sorry.
That dungeon as well. The fiery chains on Chaga. That's one of the things that I think pugs would really appreciate because that one was a boss where if someone dies with the chains, that's it. The boss is dead. You have to wipe and go again because it's
Yeah.
just gonna
I,
go for the whole time.
I don't even think that's not even like like a casual player issue. That's like an all players issue. You would like
Yeah,
occasionally because you're slowed with the chain, and then it's like, oh, okay, there's a ground effect that's underneath me. I didn't like press my mobility immediately. I'm dying.
yeah, and someone ticks out, and then you've just bricked that pull. Like that going away, really good. Really
And I mean,
helpful.
there's not really anything for RLP in Ultimon Legacy of Tier. I will say one of the big things that I think that they may have missed on here is like addressing Mass Dispel a little bit, particularly in like Ultimon and Halls of Infusion. There was such a heavy reliance on Mass Dispel in those keys. I wonder if maybe looking at that a bit will help.
I'm they did stuff to the Drakes in Halls of Infusion at the tail end of season 2, didn't they?
They
I think they
did,
tried to address that.
but the first
They
boss is still required, right?
Yeah, the first bosses, and I think they've also done some changes to the trash with the Drake, so that might be important to like mean that you don't have to do
Yeah.
them again. They're trying to make you avoid doing it. Um,
D-
I don't think the Ruby Light pools needed anything really changing. That dungeon was quite healthily settled, except for the last boss's like really high damage intake and the debuffs, which they've targeted there.
yeah, exactly. What do you think about Dodie not being in the M plus rotation? I think it's a bit
Um,
surprising to me, honestly.
I'm really shocked they didn't. On the one hand, I'm sad that Fall's not in because I quite like Fall. I'm pretty happy that Rise isn't in because I think that Rise stinks. But I'm really surprised they didn't just keep that going for the whole time because it's part of the dungeon pool. It's not an unpopular dungeon. It's not a super popular one, but it's one of the like hard mode. It's got a lot of effort in it,
Mhm.
just like Mechagon, just like Tazavesh. They like want to keep them in.
All right,
So only
cool.
giving that one season of a look seems like a
I,
kind of a
I was
miss.
just surprised more than anything else that they didn't bring it back. Like, I think it's just kind of strange.
Maybe they're worried about how high the score would inflate with 10 dungeons because if they kept the same score rating, you're going to have people 4,500 by the season end.
Is that a
More.
problem?
I don't know. That might be just something that they're eyeballing as potentially an issue.
Well, no, score's going down because dungeon level's going down with the dungeon level squish, right?
That depends on. Well, I suppose that all depends on how high people are
Oh,
still going to end up pushing for the very
uh,
top end, because you never know.
that's a good point. I actually never really thought about it like that. All right. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me, Word Up. I appreciate your insight into all the dungeon changes, and thank you. Hope you have a great rest of your day, man.
Yeah, you too. Have fun. Bye.
All right, cool. Always a blast to catch up with Word Up. And that was kind of all the dungeon tuning. Again, it was the most important stuff that we've been looking at. And that was kind of all we've seen for the 10.2.6 PTR. Again, as I kind of started this video, there wasn't a ton on it. Whenever they stated that they were going to be, unveiling the season 4 to be available in the PTR, I kind of expected a few more blue posts and kind of talking about, systematic structural changes of how they're going to be, doing the raids, how the raid rotation is going to work. Are they going to be changing anything with affixes in Mythic Plus? Are they going to be doing anything unique with Mythic Plus in general? Are they going to be going through and changing any of the larger systems? I think the only thing we really got was the antique booleans, which again are kind of interesting, especially since that you can buy cosmetics off of them. But we really didn't get any confirmation on anything else. Again, the biggest thing is just like dungeons are available for testing. And so, yeah, if you want, you can download the 10.2.6 PTR. You can go test those dungeons yourself. I'm sure that there's going to be class tuning here in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to be covering that here on the Wowhead YouTube channel. So stay liked, stay subscribed, and we will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.